Hello and welcome to the Digital Digest, your weekly breakfast of insights, tips and tricks and general information that will help anyone trying to move things forward in this digital world of accounting. This show is sponsored by FreeAgent, the award-winning small business accounting software, probably the friendliest accounting software in the world. It's also brought to you by Digital Disruptors and SB Digital, both of which are pushing the boundaries in this digital accounting space. I'm your host, Ryan Piercy, and I'm lucky enough to be joined by John Toon to dive into the world of Power Automate. So, John, on that note, let's crack on. What is Power Automate and what are the power tools inside Microsoft?
Hey Ryan, nice to be with you. Power Automate, for anyone that doesn't know, is an automation product. Used to be called Flow, that's in the Microsoft stack. And I guess for people that are probably more familiar with some of the low-code tools that are out there in the market, very similar to things like Make and Zapier, of course. But probably got a little bit more functionality and sort of blends itself into the sort of world of the things that sort of UiPath and Automation Anywhere also are capable of doing. So it's a very broad-ranging product. Because it is so broad-ranging, it does have some flaws. Probably lacks some of the capabilities at the bottom and the top end in comparison to some of those products we talked about. But that's kind of where it sits, and then it sits within the wider sort of Power Platform set of apps that Microsoft are starting to move across to the Fabric platform, which is their new data platform. And essentially you've got that sitting alongside Power Apps, so you can build apps if you so want to within the Microsoft stack. You can also use Power BI as well, so that's the dashboarding tool. All of those things all sit pretty much effectively, like I say, on the same place, on the same like data layer now, which is Fabric. So it's quite powerful if you can start to collate your data in the same places, because you can do a myriad of things with it in terms of automation, manipulation and presentation, and obviously then deliver that up to somebody through an app potentially, or allow them to interact with it through an app as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think, as Microsoft have intended, if you start bringing it all together, it enhanced it multiple times. And I know that I dabbled with Flow back in the old days and found it, one, a little bit cumbersome, and two, quite prone to breaking. Has that enhanced or become a lot easier to use since it's transitioned into Power Automate?
Yeah, I think anyone that used Flow as it was back in the day, I mean, I had a similar experience to you, Ryan, is it was a bit frustrating and a bit clunky and actually not very well connected as well. And I think that was one of the things, in comparison to things like Zapier in particular, it wasn't that easy as a low-code tool to connect to tools because you couldn't do it. So that was fairly fundamental if you wanted to do some basic automation. It has come on, significantly. It's come on leaps and bounds since then, and the ability to do things with it is much more capable. It's much more complex as well, and it does also have Copilot built into it. So you don't actually necessarily need to understand all the modules that sit within that in terms of bring them into your flow, because you can actually start to use Copilot and talk to it and sort of say, look, I want to build an automation that does this, this, and this. Can you sort of build it out? And it does a reasonable job at doing that. I mean, it's not perfect by any stretch because it's quite new built into the product. But it will get you probably 70% of the way there if you're brand new to Power Automate and using it.
Yeah, definitely. And as we've spoken at conferences on AI, you do have to vet what AI is chucking out at the moment. And Copilot's a great example of that. Nearly there seems to be the statement that summarizes most AI engines. But most accountancy firms are built on the Microsoft stack. And, even if you're just using Windows Explorer, the general trend is to now move into the cloud. So move your data into SharePoint. When you're in there, you can start utilizing, the Power tool. So getting your team or getting members of your team skilled up in this area means you can start to automate a lot more. So Power Automate is a good place to start. And something that we've done, or I guess to dabble, like we've been using and rolling out Power BI over the top of Practice Engine, our practice management tool. And we've used Power Automate to manipulate some of that data. So various different data sources, bringing them in, changing, I guess, the structure of them to slice and dice data in different ways to enhance Power BI. And that's the basic level that we've used, as well as, I guess, some basic flows such as a survey, which is nothing to sing and dance about, but is a good introduction. What have you done, John, regarding Power Automate in your practice?
Yeah, we've used it in a few different ways. I mean, I guess at its most basic, one of the things that you can do is you can switch on a flow that basically interacts with Teams and allows you to essentially send yourself a notification to remind you to reply to a Teams message. So, for example, if someone messages you at sort of 10 o'clock at night and you don't want to deal with it, you can send yourself a reminder and say, reply to Ryan at, I don't know, 8 o'clock in the morning, and it'll pop up with a notification. That's actually built in Power Automate, although if you can switch that on without necessarily interacting with Power Automate. So there are features like that are available now in the suite, which don't actually sort of make themselves known, if you like, that they're part of Power Automate. So there are quite a few of those like pre-built automations that are worth exploring. Some of the things that we've been doing more recently. So we have a client survey that goes out in one of our sectors at the moment, and it draws up information every month. And we're using Power Automate to collect that survey data once the survey is completed. It goes into a Microsoft list in PowerPoint. No, it doesn't.
there's too many power related things, John. That's the problem.
I had a meltdown. So we have a survey that goes out to clients to collect certain information in one of our industry sectors. And once we've collected that information on the survey, we're using Power Automate to take that, put it into a Microsoft list, which sits in SharePoint. And from there, we then put it into Power BI to present some of the information. My word, that was tough to get through.
This is what happens when I get you up early for a webinar, John.
That was funny.
Cool.
And then one of the other things that we also have is we have built more recently an expenses app that the staff are using, and basically that's sitting in Power Apps itself. And so it allows someone, in the same way that with most expense apps, it allows you to take a picture of a receipt. It will then sort of extract some of that information, and then once that data is extracted, we're then using Power Automate to take those bits of information, so the date and the supplier name and the amounts, etc. It takes all of those, converts them into data that's useful, because when you extract information from invoices, it sometimes says GBP, it sometimes has a pound sign, it sometimes has a comma instead of a full stop for a delimiter and things. So we do all of that in Power Automate, and then we send it into Practice Engine with a copy of the image, and all of that is happening in Power Automate to hand that data off from the app to our practice management solution.
Yeah, and I guess if you could just talk a little bit about Power Apps then, because the power, I mean, it's frustrating the fact that everyone just had power at the front of it, but you can build little tools, as you said. So how easy is it to build or script a Power App inside Fabric?
Oh gosh, I mean, I would say it's not easy. I think Microsoft would like to tell you that it is quite easy and you can build stuff quite simply. I would say you do need an element of training, and to be fair to Microsoft, they do have some quite good training around all of the Power Platforms. So I think the site is learn.microsoft.com, and you can pick up loads of training on various things there. But I would say if you want to build something that's not sort of effectively out of the box from the Microsoft stack and Power Apps, you do need to invest a little bit of time and effort into understanding how to build a Power App, and then how to make the various screens work, and then you can allow it to be user friendly from a user point of view, because I think that's quite important, because it can be a little bit clunky sometimes, but also then allow that to do stuff with that data, because you've got to make sure that whatever you're doing in the app is collected and put somewhere so that it can be used by other products in the Microsoft stack, if that's where you want to use it. So I don't think it's sort of like an entry level app product by any stretch of the imagination. Having said that, you don't need to be a programmer or developer to be able to build an app in Power Apps, but you do need to have a little bit of knowledge, I think. So I think you probably need to invest a couple of days worth of training before you'd be comfortable in terms of building something.
Yeah, I mean, part of it's process, isn't it? So that kind of even low code, engines, it's all about understanding process and logic flow. So you need to have that training, that understanding to be able to dabble in these tools anyway. I know that you have also used Power Automate as well as doing the expenses app, which is pretty cool, because I know how painful it is in Practice Engine. So solving that in any way is a big benefit. But I believe you've used it to, once again, interact with Practice Engine, but rather than manipulating data in the back end, interacting with the front end, similar to a bot. Is that right, or have I misunderstood?
Yeah, that's correct. So again, we're probably like a lot of practices, we've got a huge amount of client data and client information, and every so often we have to go through a process of checking it, cleansing it, dealing with it and stuff. And we can do that. We can do that in two different ways. We can either do it through the API that Practice Engine does have, or we can do that effectively through the user interface, and where we're doing big bulk changes. If we do it through the user interface, we will use Power Automate to make those changes. And I guess it just depends on how we're going about making the changes. So sometimes we will again build something in Power Apps and maybe use the API in the background to make those changes as people change stuff. But equally, I guess because we're accountants, we have this typical thing of you take some data out of a system, it ends up in Excel, and then you kind of share it around people and say, "Is this correct? And can you make the changes that we need to make?" And if that's the case, we will probably use a Power Automate bot to basically take that information and really just effectively do what a human would do, which is plug it in through the user interface into Practice Engine. And we've done that at a significant scale. We've updated probably in excess of 1,000 records at any one time with a bot, and just leave it churning away for however long it takes. And again, it works really well if you have a little bit of time and patience and do a little bit of testing. I think that's a critical thing. We have a test site so we can test things before we kind of launch them live. And I think that's really important, whether you're using kind of like Zapier or any of the automation tools, is to test, because the last thing you want is an automation that goes off and makes thousands of changes without any real control and being comfortable that it is doing what you expect.
Yeah, and there's always a tipping point, right, between how big is the volume you need to change to see worth building the flow or the automation, or is it just worth going and do it manually? So, but the bit I'd really like to understand, because sometimes I feel it feels like magic, right, when it's just go, oh yeah, this tool interacts with the normal web page and click through. So, can you talk for an example of how that works? Is it I guess some of the automation tools early on, they'd literally follow your mouse clicks, remember where the buttons were. Is it following the same way?
I mean, you can train Power Automate in a few different ways, but it does allow like a screen recorder, and so you can literally say, click here, scroll here, do this, type this. Actually, I find that can be a little bit clunky and it can be a bit noisy, in the same way that if you record a macro in Excel, it records absolutely everything. So if you mistakenly click in a cell, it will pick up that you clicked in cell, I don't know, E9 or whatever, and you don't actually need that in the flow. It will do the same when it's copying like a website or a desktop and stuff, in terms of it'll say, oh, you clicked on that button, or you scrolled through this page, and so it can get a little bit noisy in terms of what it picks up. I think, again, this is an area where Power Automate's actually improved quite a lot, because it does allow you now to sort of grab snippets from a screen, whether it's a web browser or whether it's looking at a desktop app and seeing that you clicked OK, or you clicked, I don't know, the search bar or something, and it can extract that and include it in the app much more cleanly than it would have done before. So I guess typically what I would do, my normal workflow, if I'm doing something which is browser based or desktop based, is I probably would record to begin with, even if it's just a few of the mouse clicks and a few of the navigation, because it is probably the quickest way to build something up. But then I will just sort of go through the steps, because probably for a I don't know, 3 or 4 step process, it might have recorded about 10 steps, because I will have moved the mouse around and navigated and stuff. So you can kind of trim some of that out. And then once you get into looking at where your data is coming from, so if it is in a list or a spreadsheet or whatever, actually I just start to build those flows up myself. And again, it's quite easy to kind of do that, because it's quite logical in terms of the open Excel, look at the table, go to the last row and extract that kind of information. And I would say, again, Power Automate changed fairly recently, so it's got a slightly different sort of user experience, which I think is a little bit easier to navigate around and utilize. And it does have Copilot, as I said, built in. So if you do get stuck sometimes, you can use that before, of course, referring to good old Google if you do get stuck on something, can't achieve it.
Yeah, I mean, that's the hard thing, right? It's where do you start? You need like an entry level way of kind of playing with this and building up. And, if I think about what I did with Flow back in the day, it was just, collect information, manipulate information, create report. And I think you can start that. But what I'd like to, I guess, understand slightly, and you may not have this information, but when do you decide to create a Power Automate rather than do something manually, or what's the trigger point where you think, okay, we're going to go down this route of using the Power Suite?
Yeah, I mean, I guess for me it's either scale or repetitiveness that are the triggers, because in that example I gave, like updating, say, like 1,000 records in Practice Engine, I'm never going to give that to one individual anymore, because or a handful of individuals, because it's just going to take them so long to do. Even if they're super slick, it's updating probably just one field in Practice Engine will probably take them 20 or 30 seconds, let's say. And if you do that, multiply the numbers up, obviously it just gets bigger. It's a bit unwieldy, and it's a bit mind numbing as well. So mistakes are likely to happen. So for me, scale is always a big consideration. And like I say, then repetitive, the repetitive nature. If we're going to be doing the same thing over and over, that's something that we would focus in on, because again, even if you're not going to do it, at scale once, you might do it at scale over a longer period of time. So over, say, 6 or 12 months or something. And that's actually sometimes the challenge to sort of tease out of people, because when you're doing a big mass data cleanse or something, that's really obvious, it's in your face. But actually, when you're looking at like what you and I do day to day, there's probably quite a few things that you could probably automate. It doesn't have to be with Power Automate, it could be with other things. But quite often we don't sort of stand back and look at this and go, oh God, I do this, like, I don't know, once every 2 weeks or something, and I'm just doing the same thing over and over. And maybe if I had a little bit of knowledge, I could step back and automate this. I think that's where a lot of firms are starting to get to, where they've sort of got a handful of people desperate to not do the same repetitive things over and over, and wanting to automate things. That's certainly where we're starting to see. And so the challenge actually for us is, going forward into the future, is how do we manage that so that these kind of, I guess, citizen developers in inverted commas, which is what other people call them, are being managed and controlled in a way that either doesn't expose our data and put it at risk, but also doing it in a way that's consistent and compliant with all of our standards, expectations, rules, requirements, ethics, etc. So that is one of the challenges. And again, we've kind of built a series of environments internally that people can start to access. We haven't really opened it up too much because it's still early days, but over a period of time, we anticipate that we'll allow people to sort of experiment and then share those flows with people, so that we could check, verify them, test them, etc., and be comfortable that they're working in the way that we expect.
Yeah, and I think the whole new wave of AI that's coming in, it's just going to make it easier to access these tools. As you said, you can kind of ask the AI to help build the flows for you, and train your team to be more experimental, try new things. That will be actually where all the development of I guess the skill set needs to go into. It's how do we interact with these tools. And the other thing is linking systems together, making sure you've got one data entry point that then flows through all the systems you work with, and then validation of data as well. All of that is where the Power Suite can really enhance it. I think that's a really good place to kind of bring this talk to a close as well. I think we've covered most of what we could probably do from an entry-level perspective for Power Automate. So let's wrap up this week's show. Hopefully this episode has provided you all with valuable insights that you can take forward. Please do check out the show notes, as we say every week, for links to the Digital Disruptors, SP Digital, and our wonderful sponsor of this episode, FreeAgent. And also anything and anyone that we have referenced in the show. If you do want to ensure you catch future episodes, please do subscribe to our YouTube channel and make sure you look out for the release every Thursday morning. And we look forward to speaking to you next week, hopefully where John and I actually have the ability to speak properly this time.